Do you ever look back to your childhood and think about exactly who you were as a child before you were influenced by others? You know, your family, your friends, experiences that you had, expectations, wanting to feel accepted, or situations that made you insecure. Because when you think about it, all those things change who we are as we get older. But when you're really young, so much of you is pure and innocent. That is when you really show those true sides of yourself, the things that bring you joy, the things that you love, the things that you have a passion for, the things that spark your creativity, all those things. That's part of your essence. And we lose so much of that. I know I have. I did lose a lot of that before I gained it back. Because I think about it now, and I'm a parent to a 5-year-old, and I just think back to those times when my son saw something for the first time, and just the look of wonder in his eyes and curiosity, and just having that huge passion for life. And now that he's 5 years old, I'm seeing that innocence is slowly trickling away, and it's a little bit heartbreaking because I want to hold on to that innocence, the purity of his soul. And because it's one of the most beautiful things, witnessing a child and their, just in their essence and in their joy. And yeah, it's something that's really hard to let go of. And I'm feeling it now because it's like it's all happening fast and it's all going away really fast. It's what life does. It starts chipping away a little bit as time goes by and who we are. And I've been really reflecting on my life and, just reflecting on my childhood and the things that, made me tick when, before I was influenced by other people. I've always loved nature. I love being in nature. I love animals. Nature was my biggest inspiration when it came to drawing. I wrote a lot of poetry when I was inspired, especially when I was getting crushes on people. I was writing a ton of poetry. I had some really great poems, actually, and I don't even know where they went. But anyway, dancing has always made me feel like so alive and happy, and getting lost in the music. Music has been my thing. I remember my mom got me like this little cassette Walkman, and I'd have like those recordable cassette tapes, and I'd make my radio mixes, and I just, I'd carry that Walkman religiously everywhere I went. I loved my Walkman. I needed to listen to my music, and I needed to make sure I had batteries. But also I had this really expansive inner world. I got lost in my daydreams, and I had this huge imagination. And I also had like a lot of time up to myself because my parents were working or my dad was out in sea. And so, I'd take myself to and from school, and I'd be walking home literally like in my own bubble of daydreams. And I get lost in books. It was like another way for me to feel free and get lost somewhere where I've never been. Those were the things that I think, stuck with me, that weren't as influenced by people until like later on in life. And there were also some traits about me too, some characteristics that I had. I remember when I was in kindergarten, we were doing an art project. And, it was like popsicle sticks, glue, construction paper. And so I was working on my little project, and, all the kids were kind of focused on their own thing. I was working on mine, and I saw this boy all the way on the other side of the table. And he looked like he was having trouble, and he didn't really know what to do. He looked confused, and there wasn't any teachers around. No one really saw what was going on. And so I went over to him and I started helping him out. And it wasn't something that anyone asked me to do. It was just always a part of me. And think about like the astrology. I have the moon in the 12th house of Virgo. And when you think of the moon is, what makes you happy. It's what you need. When you think of the 12th house is an altruistic house, seeing those that aren't seen. And then when you think of Virgo is a sign of service. Virgo, wants to help others, wants to feel of use. And so it was always a part of me that I just had this need to help people that, may have not been seen, and this boy was not. It's interesting. It was just always in me. Funny thing is, after that happened, this boy had the biggest crush on me after that, and he would chase me at recess, and he would follow me home, and it was horrible. He had the biggest crush. I don't even know where this came from, but he had a huge crush on me all the way up to the 8th grade. And I remember regretting helping him because of how our whole dynamic changed. But anyway, that was always a part of me. And there was another time too, and this kind of like relates to my Venus and Leo. And when you think of the planet Venus, Venus is, you know, it's your love language. It's what you attract, what's attracted to you, what you value. It's how you interact in relationships. When you think of the sign of Leo, Leo is the lion, and the lions are the king of the jungle. You know, they stand out amongst everybody, and they want to stand out, and they want to, you know, they have this way of expressing themselves. They're very expressive, and you can think of a lot of Leos, you know, a lot of Leo sons or people with strong Leo placements. They love to perform or do something where they stand out. And so I remember I was in 4th grade, and I saw one of my friends. She came to school with this like frilly pink princess dress with all these like rhinestones, and she was sparkly. I think she even wore a crown, but I remember seeing her in that dress, and I think she had a party to go to after. But I thought about it, and I was like, I want to wear a dress to school for no reason. I just want to wear a dress. So I remember looking in the closet to see if there's any dresses for me. My mom had a dress in there, and it was like this horrible 80s purple dress, and it had like these big puffy sleeves. It was like, and then these like puffy layers on the bottom, and it looked like there was like confetti thrown up all over it, and it was just horrible. But I thought it was the coolest thing ever. And so I remember like one day I went to school, and my friend, she saw me, and she's like, why are you wearing that dress? And I lied to her, and I told her that I had to go to a party after, a birthday party. And she totally knew I was lying. She totally called me out on it. And I never did that again. I never wanted to do that again because I was just so embarrassed. I was really embarrassed. And, you know, I cared about what other people thought. And I just, you know, I was influenced by her. So that was something that, you know, she took away from me in a sense. You know, when you're young, you're going to be influenced by others. But, you know, now I'd been like, no, I'm wearing the dress. But anyway, that was one of the things that I hid. After that, I hid from myself, like, you know, wanting to stand out in a sense. But there was another time, and this was actually, I was a little bit older. I was in 8th grade, and I was starting a new school. On my first day, I met this girl, and she was definitely one of the popular girls. You know, she's really pretty. She had a great fashion style. She didn't dress like she was in 8th grade. She dressed like she was in high school, I'll tell you that much. But she was definitely popular. And for some reason, she took a liking to me, or at least I thought, like, why does she want to be my friend? But I took it as a compliment, and it was a huge ego boost for me. And I was just like, oh yeah, you know, the popular girl wants to be my friend. You know, it made me feel good. And I remember the next day I went into like a science class, and it was the first time me going to that science class. And I saw one of my old friends that I went to elementary school with, and I had known her since kindergarten. And I saw her, and she was sitting with her friend. You know, they're obviously not popular at all. And she calls me over to sit at her table. And so I start walking to the back of the room towards her table. But then, you know, there's another table that's close by, and it ends up being that popular girl that I had met the day before. And she's like with a group of other popular girls. And she stands up, and she kind of walks towards me, and she's like, hey, why don't you come sit at our table? And I'll never forget it, because it was like such a Libra moment. And I'm a Libra sun and a Libra rising. And I remember, you know, when you think of Libra, Libra is represented by the sign of the scales. And Libras are known to being very indecisive. You know, they're always trying to balance. They're trying to figure out what tips the scales, which way to go. And I remember looking at my friend, and I remember looking at, you know, my new friend, and I didn't know what to do. I was really tempted to sit with my new friend. You know, I wanted to be part of the popular crew, and I was so tempted to do that, and I almost went to that table, but something inside of me didn't feel right. And, I couldn't not sit with my friend who I've known for years, and just because she wasn't popular, it didn't sit well with me. So I went ahead and I sat with her, and I remember the popular girl, she kind of like rolled her eyes at me and she gave me the dirtiest look, and she never talked to me ever again. She was so insulted by that. But that's something that's always been a part of me. And one thing about Libras is, even though they have this reputation for being a people pleaser, and I will confirm that because I was a people pleaser for a very long time. But the one thing about them is that they will fight for fairness. If it doesn't feel right, if it doesn't feel fair, they will fight for fairness. That's one thing. They won't people please in that sense. But thinking about that and thinking about, those little things that I loved when I was younger, and, those traits and those characteristics that I had, the characteristics that, ended up being hidden and buried because I was just so influenced by people, and I wanted to be seen well, and I wanted to impress people, and I wanted to be accepted, all of that, it changed who I was. And I started losing myself and got so deep to the point where I didn't even know who I was anymore, because I was reflecting everybody else. I wasn't knowing who I really was. And that's why I wanted to talk about this, and who we were at our purest form. And it's interesting because I'm getting out of a very, very long relationship, really my only relationship that I've ever had. And there was so much that I held back. There's so much that I was afraid to show. I was afraid to show a lot of my creativity because I didn't feel like it was embraced at all. And so I hid it. Now that I'm in this divorce process, I'm getting in touch with who I am, or who I was before, it got all lost. Just little things too, like little things that I do when I'm cooking, washing dishes, cleaning. I like turn up the music and I get lost in the music, and it's like I love it. It just makes the everyday so much better. Every chance I get, I go outside and just look at nature and watch it unravel. And it's just things that you wouldn't necessarily see because you're not paying attention to it. But I don't know, for me, I just love sitting in nature and watching the animals and everything. When I'm inspired, I write poetry. If I feel called to, I'll dance. There's little things that I incorporate in my life to really add love to it, and so I can heal that inner child, and I feel the difference. I've never felt more in my skin. I'm not depending on anybody for happiness. I'm putting the happiness in my hands. I'm taking control of it. And that's something that no one can take away from me. And that's honestly a power in itself. Having control of your own happiness rather than letting someone else control that. And I was doing that for so long. I was letting someone control my happiness. And the past few years, I was miserable. I was so miserable. So I turned the tables on that. And I'm getting in touch with who I've always been, but, was hidden for so long. So I encourage, just imagine who you were, take some time out to really reflect on who you were as a child. Think about those earlier times when you were just the happiest that you've ever been, and you're curious and you had a passion for life, and what it is that sparked your creativity, and what were the things that you did, what kind of creative activities did you do, what were the things that you loved, because those are the little clues that tell you who you were before the world started changing you, before the world started shaping you. You think about when you are a child and you become an adult, and there's so many things that happen to us, and some worse than others, and that can really make somebody just not be happy in life. And you start to see life in such a negative way because of all the sorrows, because of all the struggles and the challenges and the traumas. And I truly believe that it's about getting away from that and learning how to flip it around and really do something to take charge of your life and find that passion, find that sparkle that you used to have. And you have to find a way to really incorporate those things that make you happy. You know, it really is a conscious decision, but it's worth it. I think anybody, if they wanted it that bad, it just takes looking at your life through a different lens. If you look at life through a negative lens, your life is going to be negative. But if you flip that around, you start looking at life through a positive lens, what you believe you could make into reality. But you have to believe it. It starts with believing and connecting with who you were at your purest form. And if you wanted to get even deeper than that, deeper than just reflecting on who you were, because there's only so much that we could really remember from our memories, unless, you have a photographic memories, well then, cheers to you. But if you really wanted to go in deeper, you can look at your birth chart, because how I see it is at that very moment that you take your first breath, at exactly where you are, that moment, taking a snapshot of what the stars were like above you and below you at that very moment, at that very point where you're at, that is your birth chart. It's above, it's below, but it's also within, because it's who you are. It's who you are at your purest form. Before life influenced you, before your experiences, your traumas, your challenges, expectations, society, all of that changed you. That shows you who you are at your purest form, but it also shows you your greatest potential. And your greatest potential is from getting past your greatest challenges. That is the key to your greatest potential, is knowing how to get past your challenges, because those challenges are actually the key to your success. Whatever success may be to you, because it's different for everybody. What you look at yourself internally, look at who you were at your purest form, look at the things that have really challenged you in life, acknowledge them, face them, being aware, being self-aware, and doing the things that'll help you heal and help overcome those challenges. That's the secret sauce to getting what it is, getting like true fulfillment and true happiness. Whoever is out there that feels like kind of living in a mask, you also have to know how to incorporate the joy in life. What makes you tick, what makes you feel creative, what makes you feel seen. Because at the end of the day, we still have that inner child that wants to be seen, that wants to be loved, that wants to see the joy in life. But it starts with you, and it starts with you loving yourself. Because for so long, I know I was looking for love to make me feel good about myself, but I've never felt more complete, because I have this strong self-worth now. I know I talk about it a lot, but I feel passionate about it. That's why I talk about it a lot. I could go on and on and on, and I'm not going to talk your ear off unless you want me to. Then leave me a comment and I will talk your ear off. But peace and self-love.